In this lesson, we're going to give you a step-by-step method of approaching your comprehension test. Step 1 would be to skim the text or the texts, depending on how many. In other words, you look at the title, and these things will happen very quickly in your head. You're going to just skim. Remember, it's looking very quickly at the text. You look at the title, and when you look at the title, you look out for puns and you look out for references, right? Does that ring a bell somehow? Is there an idiom involved? Does it remind me of something? Is there a pun, for instance? So you just take note of the title and see what it's all about. Also take note very quickly of the author. Who is writing this? Because that's going to perhaps give you an idea of the intention of this author, or a bit of background as to who he is and what he stands for, etc. Just quick. If there's something, there's something. If there's nothing, there's nothing. But check for it, please. Very important to look at the type of text. Have a quick look at the comprehension text A. What type of text is it? You'll be able to see very quickly. It's informative, or it is meant for entertainment. It is humorous, or whatever. You're going to see very quickly what type of text to expect. Is it very formal or informal? So that might give you an idea as to the intention. Does it wish to inform you? Does it wish to entertain you, etc.? So remember, what I'm saying is you're not going to ponder about this forever. You're just going to look at it quickly and get a quick idea while you are skimming your text A, right? A quick tip would be to have a look at the beginning and the ending of each paragraph. Have a quick look at this first sentence and the last sentence of each paragraph, because very often you'll find that is the place where you find the topic sentence. In other words, the key idea of what the paragraph is all about. So in the skimming process, you look for all these things, the first and the last sections, the title, the author, the puns, and all of those things that might have a meaning. And at the same time, you're going to disregard aspects that you think, oh, no, I don't think this is important, but this is important, right? So you survey the text and you get a very general idea during the skimming process, right? An important thing to ask yourself, or a sort of rule of thumb idea, is to have certain words in your head, and those are the W words and the H word. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 W's and then 1 H. Have these words in your head, and you can even write them down before you start skimming this, and make little notes as you're going along, because you're going to ask yourself the who. Now, who will refer to the speaker. Okay, who's the speaker in this passage? Is it the author? Because I have noticed the author, right? Okay, is it the same person? Is it a different speaker? Oh yes, it's a different speaker. And then you're going to ask yourself, okay, who is the speaker? What is his role in this text? Who is he? Is he a reporter, or what is he? So the who firstly refers then to who is speaking, as opposed to the author himself. It might be the author. And then who is involved in terms of the text. I have now skimmed this text and I've read certain words. I've read the word Rafensi, and there was some information about this singer's background, and so, okay, it's Rafensi. So I write it down. That's the who in terms of who this passage is about. And there might be more than one person or organizations or groups of people perhaps involved in this text. So the who then has two aspects: who's the speaker and who's involved in the text. The what is the subject matter. what is being spoken about. So you've got the name Rafensi written down, the what, Rafensi's background. He's growing up, right? His interest in music or whatever. So what is the subject matter all about? So that is the what question that you're going to ask yourself. You're going to then ask yourself the why question. Why, firstly, why is this text written about, say, for instance, Rafensi? Why did he want? He wanted to show us what a phenomenal success this boy has had in his music, and the reasons why, etc. So, why is it written? He wants to inform us, in other words. What is the intention of the author? He wants to inform us, as I said. And then also, the why can also be the reason for the action in the text, because we're looking at what's happening in the text and in terms of the speaker and author. So, in other words, why did this person that's spoken about in the text, say Rafensi, why did he act like that? Why did he follow a certain route and not another route? Who gave him directions? Who gave him advice, etc.? So you look at all these who's, the what's, and the why's, and where does it happen? The setting of the actual text. Where does this all happen? Where he grew up, he's in Vereniging and other places. He now lives in Pretoria. So you just jot down those few things, or you just keep it in your head. It's there. You just make that kind of mind map very quickly as you are skimming, right? Then it's also the how question. So you've got the 4 W's and the 1 H. How. What else do you need to look for when you're skimming before you even starting to try and answer any question? You're not going to go there yet. You're just skimming everything. The how, you're going to have to ask yourself how many texts are involved. You have looked at text 1, right? You have skimmed it and you've asked yourself those questions. Now you see, okay, but there is yet a text 2, and sometimes there are 3 texts. It depends, but usually 2 texts. And how many texts involved? How many? And what type of texts are they? The second text is a visual text, and then that's a type of text. And look at the style of the text, for instance, and how it's put together, and how are the actions carried out, and how, in other words, if the second text is an advertisement, how does it function? How does it bring across its message? If it's a cartoon, how does it create humor? How does it present an aspect of the same subject that we heard about in text A? So you ask yourself all sorts of hows and whys and whos as you are reading, right? Just to make sense of how this the text in general is put together, or the texts. Once again, as I've said in a previous lesson, you quickly also skim the comprehension questions. Also, and while you're reading, think of the who's and the how's. Keep those in mind. Who have you read about? Why? And in this question, how is that question phrased, and what does it have to do with the who, with Rafensi? What aspect of his background does this question want to know more about? You look at the question types and you look at the mark allocations. You highlight keywords, instruction words, so and aspects of the context that stand out. So the whole skimming process before you even start must be your active involvement with this text, very quickly getting quick answers to quick questions, right? That's what it's all about. It gives you this impression of where you're going to. Step 3 will then, of course, be after you've read the questions, because remember that the skimming part can include skimming the questions, but you might not have enough time for that. But the point is that you have to read the questions very well and make little notes and underline and highlight before you start reading the actual text in depth. So now, of course, you go and you read the passage carefully. You read it very carefully. And you keep in mind the questions that you have read carefully and that you have commented upon, that you have linked to certain who's and why's, etc. So you keep the questions in mind and look for aspects as you're reading that ring about. Oh, there was a question about that, I remember. So I just highlight this word. There was a question about his background, where he was born and so on. And then I remember I highlighted, say, vereniging. So it rings a bell. So if it rings a bell, just highlight that aspect there. Underline or highlight vereniging, for instance, because then that is the place where I'm going to find the actual answer. So you are just bringing your initial impression and the actual reading of the text together, and once again interacting with the text. So if it rings a bell, just highlight or something. Now, there may be some difficult words in your text, and by now you should have some word attack skills to help you find the meaning. But the thing is, you're going to have to look at the context. If you don't know what a word means, you're going to have to make an informed guess. You're going to have to look at the context around it and say, well, at least it sounds like a positive word, not a negative. There's nothing negative about the word. So what can I link it to, etc. Try and find out more or less what the meaning is. Don't stress and say, oh, now I'm going to fail because I didn't understand this one word. Perhaps it's not necessary for you to really know what the word means exactly. As long as you have an approximate idea of what it means, you will get away with it, right? So you might also then think of a synonymous expression or a word, a synonym that can replace that fancy word that you're not quite sure what it means. Now, of course, when you start focusing on the questions, you must please, I beg you, do it one by one. Focus on a question. There's not a single question there. It doesn't matter whether it counts 2 or 4. Remember, 2 questions of 2 marks each add up to 4. And that's like one of those higher order questions that's 4 marks. Don't think 2 marks, it's only a 2 mark. Add up those 2 marks and see where it gets you. Every single question deserves your focused attention. And you look at that question, you make sure that you understand everything about that question. Answer it fully, concisely, and I'm done with it. Now you focus on the next one, and you do it systematically in a focused way. You must never become hurried and jump around and say, oh, I'm going to go to the questions that count 4 first. I'm going to do this. Don't have that haphazard approach. It's not going to work for you. Work systematically and focused, right? So look out for the literal and the reorganizing questions, as we've told you about. And don't think, oh, these are easy. I'm just going to very easy. Answer them properly according to their instructions and the keywords. You already know what those are, the literal ones, name, describe, easy to get. It's there in the text. It's explicitly given. As I said in another lesson, is that these answers are in the text and they must simply be taken out and incorporated into your answer. Don't rush, but answer fully but concisely. what did I want to, I wanted to say something here about that text. If you want to take oh yes, about taking from the text. While the 2 mark answers, the literal and the reorganization questions are usually out of 2 marks, and they are right there in front of you. Be very careful, because you shouldn't just lift the answer from the text. You can't just go and take that sentence from the text and go and plonk it onto your answer sheet. That's not how you should answer. Furthermore, don't quote, right? Think in a simple way and just answer the question simply but fully. All right, but concisely. Don't overdo it. Don't become too wordy about it. So remember this thing about lifting. Don't just lift from the passage, because that's not answering in your own words. Then for the questions counting 3 and 2 that will follow the 2-mark questions, that will require inference. Those are, of course, the category 2 questions. What was the cause of? We have to think about something that is explicitly given to you and infer an answer. We've talked about that. Make sure that you recognize the kind of question and be consciously aware of the fact that you are actually inferring. You are not just simply giving what is in front of you. You must from that infer something else. Take note of that. Always be conscious of what you're doing and think back to the other aspects mentioned in the other lessons about comprehension tests. When you do the evaluation and the appreciation questions, remember we said they make out 20%. They involve your judgments. Now, once again, become aware of what you're doing. You are now required to have an opinion. So steer clear of just treating a judgment question or an evaluation question as though it is just an inference question. This is what they say, so that is the case, right? That's just inferring. And also not just taking it out and say, oh, this is your answer. You must now know that you must form an opinion and be conscious of that, right? So form a judgment concerning values, facts, opinions, credibility, validity. We've spoken about that. Do you think this account of whatever is realistic? Do you think the man's action is morally excusable? Look at the words and ask yourself whether it requires a judgment from you. If something is morally excusable, the suggestion is that you think what he did is either good or bad or right or wrong, and you have a judgment. So would you, as a person, excuse it? And on what grounds would I excuse that behavior? Can you see that you must be aware of your thinking, that you are in fact judging and that you are not just inferring? You have to state your opinion. You have to give a solid substantiation for your opinion, and it must be based on aspects covered in the text, but you must now go beyond the text and also give your own opinions that you hold. However, remember that in these cases where you have to give an evaluation or an opinion about something, you can never ever just give any old answer. I think so because one day long ago this happened to me. It's not good enough. You're going to have to look at the general gist of the text and make an inference. In other words, go sort of step by step. This is what I got explicitly from the text. This is what I inferred from the text. Now, how do I feel? How do I judge whatever happened within this text? So you're going to have to look at that, and based on that, you can have your own opinion. So, in other words, such an answer will always start by identifying the aspect covered and then carrying on by explaining how this is dealt with in the passage, and then going on to your own judgment, but substantiated. And that must be the main part of your answer. And that'll probably count 2 of the 3 or the 4 marks given to this, allotted to this question. So, in other words, the main part must be your judgment, but you must base it on what you've heard in the text, on what you've inferred. It does not mean that you have to agree with it. You can disagree with it. You can have your own opinion, but it must at least be substantiated in some logical way and flowing from the text. That's very, very important. Otherwise, it's not going to work for you. So that also goes for personal appreciation, whether you enjoyed something, whether you thought it was effective. How effective do you find the imagery used? Then you look at the effectiveness of it, and then once again you go from the text, you pinpoint the actual imagery, you infer from it, and then you go to your judgment. Why was it effective? Very effective because it gets the reader to think about certain aspects or whatever it is, why it was so effective. You then give your own opinion. Perhaps you can say how it contributes to the tone, how it created a morbid tone, or the mood. In other words, how did it make you feel? You see, all those things can come in, but you can't just say, oh, this is how I felt and blah. You must follow the steps and get to your own opinion, which is your own opinion, but at least it must be rooted in the gist of what was being said in the text. Can you identify with the sentiment expressed? Then you state your sentiment, then you provide a very well substantial reason for it. Remember again, this has been mentioned before, if there's a comparison, you will not get the full 4 marks if you don't refer to both texts. So you're going to have to say how this aspect covered in whatever was referred to, paragraph 9, how it responds to this other text and what is different or similar about it, or whatever you're asked to be done. If it's contrast, then you must give that, and the contrast must be very clear, right? And you must refer in text A, it must be somewhere, and then in paragraph 9 of text A, and then in text B, must be in your answer. Otherwise, you're not going to get the full mark. Don't forget. And please do not lose focus. As I said, focus from the first question, even though it's a very simple question. Focus on it, do it properly. And when you get to the more higher level questions at the end, still focus. Don't stop focusing, and do whatever you are expected to do in that question in terms of instructions and keywords, whatever it is. So it must be a focused and a very well organized attempt when you do a comprehension test. And don't forget, you have maximum 50 minutes to do it. Don't lose track of time. Also, constantly be aware of time that's ticking, but don't get stressed and focus all the time. Okay.